When Nixium was a kid, his mother had a really violent partner. One night he was woken up by shouting in the living room and quietly crept out of bed to investigate. He hid behind a door where he could see his mom's boyfriend pointing a shotgun at her face. He was screaming, saying he would kill her if she called the police. Nixium was so scared he fell over. His mom's boyfriend pointed his shotgun at Nixium and with an expressionless face told him to go to his room. Luckily, the neighbors heard the fight and the police shortly arrived afterwards. They never saw him again. Dolan and his brother Zaraganba once worked night shifts at a local factory. Dolan's brother was in charge of sorting parts while Dolan operated the machinery. One night, Dolan was really restless. He kept pacing about trying to distract his brother from work. Zaraganba told him to go back to his workstation, and Dolan would say,
"But I'm bored."
An hour later, Zaraganba's boss came over and asked where Dolan was. Apparently, Dolan's machine had been left unattended and almost backed up. They searched around and found Dolan waiting outside watching YouTube on his phone. Dolan had just decided to quit his job without telling anyone and was waiting for Zaraganba to finish his shift so he could get a ride home. Zaraganba told his boss he was sorry for being related to such a failure of a brother. Ghost Toast and his wife have a cat named Meowshi who figured out how to drown things. It all started when she caught a moth and dropped it into her water bowl. That's when she figured out that if she held it under long enough, the bubbles and splashing would stop. Meowshi then tried to drown their new puppy when she caught him drinking from her bowl. Ghost Toast and his wife heard weird noises and went to check it out. Meowshi was laying on the puppy's head with his muzzle under the water.
When Doopy was in science class, she and her friends sat at the back of the room. One day, while they were doing nothing, Doopy and her friends heard a strange drilling sound coming from the other side of the wall. Doopy told her teacher, but she didn't believe it and just thought Doopy was playing a prank. But she sure believed Doopy when a huge sledgehammer came through the wall seconds later. All 5 students in the back row were scared for their lives and got absolutely covered in dust and plaster. They never found out who was responsible, and Doopy's teacher still believes Doopy had something to do with it. The school did nothing about it, so for the rest of the year, the classroom had a huge hole in one of its walls.
Hi. If you're eating something, I would recommend putting it down for this story because it's kind of gross. So I wanted to be a dog groomer at one point in my life, and I got a job being a dog bather. The only thing I didn't know was that when you are a dog bather, you have to express the anal glands of the dogs. And a lot of people don't know what that is, and the best way I can explain it to you is dogs have glands in their anuses that hold anal fluid, which is basically just fecal matter soup. Little dogs in particular have trouble expressing these glands by themselves, while bigger dogs tend to do so when they go to the bathroom. So as a groomer, when you're washing dogs, you have to put your hands down there and squeeze it out of the smaller dogs who can't do it by themselves. And for a while, I used gloves until we ran out, and my boss threw a fit because we were going through gloves way too fast. And so I had to do the unthinkable. I had to do it with my bare hands. And I did it every day with my bare hands for 2 years. It was gross, but my boss made me do it. And that was a part of the job. And I did it. And I don't plan on ever doing it again. Especially because sometimes you can't aim where it goes.
Tolop's weirdest secret is that when he was 10 years old, he was sitting in his backyard playing with toys. He was playing with his action figures, minding his own business, when he suddenly saw a bee buzzing around his head. Instead of trying to shoo the bee, Tolop decided to whip out his King Kong dong and piss on the poor defenseless bee until it couldn't fly anymore. The bee died in a pool of urine in the grass. It wasn't his proudest moment. Luckily, nobody saw him murder the animal with his urine of death.
When I was a teenager, I had a sudden nosebleed and I couldn't find any paper towels. Couldn't find them in the cabinet, couldn't find them in the kitchen, couldn't find them anywhere, so I looked at my sister's room. They weren't there either. But she did have tampons, and those stopped blood, so I grabbed a handful of them, jammed them on my nose, and stopped my nosebleed. Once the bleeding stopped, I put the bloody tampons on my table and kind of forgot about them. Later during the day, my sister came in and saw the bloody tampons on my desk and had quite a few questions, not the least of which being where her tampons went. Took me a long time to explain that one, but hey, at least my nosebleed was taken care of.
Melissa's boyfriend decided to break up with her while they were graduated. Not before or after, during. As Melissa was handed her diploma, she smiled back at her boyfriend, and he walked up to her on the stage. He grabbed the microphone and said, "I'm sorry, I'm breaking up with you." Everyone gasped in disbelief, and Melissa just started crying in front of everyone. She was depressed for the next year and would do anything but read her old fan fictions. It's alright, Melissa. If I saw that guy in real life, I'd kick him in the balls.
One time, Melissa had a crush on a boy, and they started talking and flirting with each other. They were together for about a week when she asked him to come to homecoming, and he said yes. Melissa had her first kiss with him at homecoming. A few days later, he told her that they couldn't be together because he was busy with football. He told her they could date again after his season ended. The next day, Melissa saw him making out with another girl. She confronted him about it, but he turned the whole thing on her, claiming that Melissa was just jealous and that he had just bonded with her for a few hours. Later, he got suspended for 4 months for having sex with that girl in the teacher's lounge.
Tolop went to Komori-Con with his sister and their cousin. They sat by the door to the merchandise area, resting after having looked around the convention all day. Just then, Tolop saw someone in a Batman costume, wearing a tutu, flailing his arms like a bird. So, Tolop asked the man if he could record a video of him. He just said, "You see the size of these thunder thighs? I could squat all day." The man then slapped his thighs, making Tolop and his cousin laugh their asses off.
The worst babysitter Sweet Commando ever had was a teenage girl his parents always left him with whenever they went out. Whenever she watched him, she made him massage her feet and file her nails. She also made him watch very boring TV shows, and then she would lock him in a dark closet for hours. Then, about half an hour before his parents were due home, the babysitter would let Sweet Commando out. One day, he passed out from fear, and he didn't wake up until a few hours later. After that, his parents fired her and got Sweet Commando a new babysitter who was much nicer.
When Salty Squid was 17, he was admitted to the hospital with a serious heart problem. When the doctors decided that he needed a new heart, they sent him to Sweden to get it. After Salty Squid was hooked up to a machine, his brother flew in from Iceland to see him. Once he got there, he asked Salty Squid if he could do anything for him. He told his brother that he saw an ad on TV for an Xbox, so his brother left the hospital to go to the mall. He returned with a box containing a new Xbox One with 3 extra controllers and 10 game discs. He set it up for Salty Squid, handed him a controller, and told him that because he had bought it for him, that he had to play Halo 3 with him. It was the only source of entertainment Salty Squid had during his otherwise boring stay at the hospital.
Gergak was on a date with a girl who was Mexican. Prior to the date, she told Gergak that her family had ties to Mexican gangs. That didn't stop Gergak, so he took her out for a movie and Subway. While Gergak was walking her home, he told a joke and she started laughing hysterically and yelling, "I'm dying, stop it." Her brother and dad were outside and they mistook her laughing for cries of agony. Gergak then heard lots of things yelled at him in Spanish, and then the girl's brother and father started shooting at him. Gergak got grazed by a bullet on his left arm, but wasn't seriously hurt. Somehow, they continued dating after that.
When Sid was 17 and trying to get a job, his mother went with him to get an application to McDonald's. The manager handed him an application and began writing his information down. His mom sat with him and started talking about how the manager's body language was implying that they didn't want to give him the application. Sid didn't really notice anything, so he just continued filling it out. Most of the staff at that particular McDonald's was bilingual in Spanish and English, but they mostly spoke to each other in Spanish. As Sid was filling out his application, his mother began to mumble underneath her breath, complaining and doubting that they were going to hire him. Those complaints began to get a little louder, until she loudly made a racially insensitive comment that everybody heard about how they weren't going to hire him because he would be the only non-Spanish speaking person there. Sid was shocked and humiliated, but did not say anything and just hurried along the application so they could leave. He never went with her to a McDonald's ever again.
One summer, Ramona had a very strange dream. She dreamt that her and her parents went to an Islamic country where she quickly realized that they had to stay there for a very long time. That meant that she would have to go to one of their schools. After joining a school, from out of the blue, Ramona saw her niece, but noticed that something was off about her. They shared a dorm and even had to take a shower together for some reason. After taking the shower, while Ramona brushed her teeth, her niece yelled for help. Ramona ran to the shower where she saw her niece squatting. She blankly stared as her niece gave birth to 2.5 dolls, 3 melons, and some weird-ass toys. That was when Ramona woke up, shocked. Sigmund Freud would have loved that one.
Doopy was dating a guy who was pretty quiet and very sweet, but the closer she got to him, the more insecure that she realized he was. He would get super emotional whenever Doopy would go out with her friends, but Doopy just thought it was kind of cute. Little did she know, anger was building up in him over time. When his birthday came, it unfortunately fell on the same day as Doopy's grandmother's funeral. When she told him she couldn't be there on his birthday, he yelled at her for betraying him and leaving him alone. The concept of being there for her during a hard time, apparently, it just never occurred to him. He dumped Doopy the next day with more yelling. Doopy just looked at him in the eyes and said,
Bullet dodged.
When Dolan was growing up, his mother was very strict with bad words. No one dared to swear when she was around. One time at the dinner table, he was telling a story and speaking really fast and kept fumbling his words. He really needed salt, but didn't want to stop his story. So instead of saying, "Could you please pass me the salt?" for some reason he blurted out, "Could you please pass me the fuck?" He covered his mouth real fast, hoping his mom didn't hear, but of course she did. She looked at him in disbelief and told him he was grounded for a month.
When Zara Ganba was in 8th grade, he would volunteer to walk to his school's elementary building to help teachers with their classes, but he had to cut through the high school parking lot to get to the elementary building. One day, while he was walking over, the whole parking lot was blocked off by police tape, and there were ambulances, fire trucks, and 2 very mangled cars. As he tried to get around the blocked off area, Zara wondered,
How the heck does a crash like this happen in a parking lot?
That was when he noticed his brother being pulled out from one of the cars and put into an ambulance. A few traumatizing moments later, Zaragamba ran into Danger Dolan, alive and well. Dolan explained that every year before prom, the local fire department volunteers would collaborate with the school and host a fake car crash, raising awareness for drunk driving. 4 years later, before his prom, Zaragamba got to reenact the exact same fake crash.
Honeybits had a job house sitting and taking care of the neighbor's cat. There were a couple of other weird requests included. Honeybits was also told to sing to the flowers so they didn't get lonely and die. She got an extra $40 if she washed the cars, but only if she told the cars they were sexy while she rubbed them all over. Honeybits was also told to make sure Tom got food, and Tom wasn't one of the cats. Tom was the ghost that lived in the house and played with the cats. A ghost that needed food to live.
Doopy's 2 little sisters once fought over who got which balloon. The thing was, both balloons were exactly the same. At first, she just told them to knock it off. That's when things started to get heated. Her sisters pulled each other's hair, hit each other, and screamed. Doopy got between them and pushed them to the ground. She yelled at them to knock it off, hug it out, and apologize, all before popping both balloons. She said,
Now you got nothing to fight over.
Now, Doopy sometimes looks back and thinks that maybe she should have tried explaining to them that the balloons were the same.
Honeybits has 3 roommates, 2 who are awesome and 1 who's an inconsiderate slob. Even though she's a full-grown adult, this horrible roommate doesn't know how to wash dishes, vacuum, shop for groceries, do laundry, or even change a freaking toilet roll. She constantly steals her roommate's food and barges into their rooms without knocking. But the thing that frustrates Honeybits the most is that she's never once taken out the garbage, even though she walks right past the garbage room whenever she leaves the apartment. One day Honeybits got really sick and had to stay home from work. She told her roommates she would be sleeping all day and not to disturb her. But sure enough, Honeybits' horrible roommate barged into her room carrying 2 big bags of stinky garbage. She dropped the bags on the floor, putting bin juice everywhere, and said,
Hey, Honeybits, take these to the garbage room. I'm going for Starbucks.
Honeybits gave her the evilest stare anyone has ever given, her roommate's face went completely pale and she said,
Okay, maybe I'll do it then.
Well, this one is interesting. It's one of the earliest jobs I ever had. Let's just call it Project X. So I worked there for not too long. When I went for the group interview, everyone else there was like, they didn't even say a word. I easily got the job because I was literally the only applicant that said like more than 2 words. So I went back there a few times, and every time I asked them, what's the deal with the job? Like, what do you have to do? And they're like, bits and pieces, just make some phone calls, just read through this thing. I'm like, okay, all right, fair enough. And so I'd go there, and they'd be like, all right, so ring this place and tell them to expect Project X to visit them. I'm like, okay, that's foreboding, but sure. So I called them up and I'd do that. And the people in the course actually sound kind of scared. I'm like, what have I got into? What is this job? I've actually got a business card from that place, and I would show it to my friends and I'd be like, I work here. And the business card literally said nothing. It just said the name of the place, Project X, and it would have the names of the people who were in charge of it, and no other details, no descriptions. To this day, I don't know what the job was. I worked there for months, and I didn't know what I was doing. But the problem is I'm willing to work at a place that is dodgy, but they didn't pay me squat. They paid me enough to afford the petrol to get to the job, and that was it. So technically I was working for free. So luckily now I have a really cool job managing a YouTube channel and running a company and stuff. It's fun.
When I was about 7 years old, I had a pretty overreactive imagination. I would always think that I could fly. I could always fly, just like Superman and Super Saiyan Goku. So one day it was class and it was recess, and I slid down the slide, and as soon as I did that, I made sure that I jumped out and screamed, "I'm going Super Saiyan!" After that, the whole class knew I did that, and then they called me Super Saiyan Pringles.
For a little while in high school, I worked in an electronics shop. One afternoon, I had a guy come in and he was asking about a chipset that could help him identify UFOs. I explained that I wasn't aware of such a chipset, and that perhaps the detection mechanisms that we were currently using were not of an adequate spectrum to capture UFOs successfully. He agreed that was probably an issue, and in fact wanted to sell me a brand new chipset that would detect UFOs successfully. I told him that sounded like a wonderful idea, and that he should talk to my manager about it. I watched as the guy went over to my manager, barely suppressing a laugh, knowing how ridiculous that conversation would be.
In primary school, Ramona had a huge crush on the class bad boy. She was always trying to think of ways to impress him, and one day came up with the brilliant idea to lie and cut class. Without thinking, she raised her hand to get the teacher's attention and said the first thing that came to her mind. "Miss, can I please be excused? I have, diarrhea." The whole class gasped and the teacher was horrified. She told Ramona to go to the toilet right away. As Ramona was leaving, she glanced at her crush. She expected him to be impressed, but he had the most disgusted look on his face. After that day, Ramona decided that pursuing him was a lost cause.
When he was 16, Hellbent worked at a McDonald's. While working with the fries, one of his coworkers came up from behind and pulled his pants down. He then threw them in the fryer. Hellbent was very embarrassed and went home without his pants that day. The next day, he texted his coworker saying that they were no longer friends. He also ended up quitting.
I had my first girlfriend when I was about 10 or 11. It was weird and I didn't really know what I was doing. I must have liked her though, because one day I found a ring and I planned on giving it to her as a present. We went on a field trip to the local pool and I didn't talk to her much the next day because I wanted to talk to her without anyone else there. So while we lined up for the bus back to school, she wanted to know if I still loved her, which she communicated by passing messages through like 5 of her friends. I said yes, but they weren't convinced, and after being pestered by them for ages, I just said no because it's private and I really hated talking to her friends about it. And that's the story of how I accidentally dumped my girlfriend.
So McCollum decided to hack the security system where he worked as an IT expert. However, he didn't know that he was hacking the webcams that looked into his boss's office. While hacking, McCollum forgot to put in a single line of code, which made his boss able to see him. His boss saw McCollum's friend, Gergak, standing naked in the bathroom. Gergak asked, "Hack, you got that camera hacked yet?" His boss took away his coding equipment, but thanked him for finding a way to look over the workplace without anyone knowing. He even said, "McCollum and his naked friend brought a new security system to our workplace." McCallum was teased about it for a year.
So, me and my boyfriend, yes, my boyfriend, who is not Danger Dolan, were going Christmas shopping this past December. And we went by a discount bookstore that has some really, weird anime figures that nobody wants and shit. So we wanted to get something that was really risque for our friends. We thought it would be funny. So we walked down to the aisle where the figures were, and there was an employee there who was, doing employee stuff. So as we were looking, he turned to us and he was like, "I really like your hair." So my boyfriend said, "Oh, which one of us?" And he said, "Both of you. I wish I could have hair like that." So Jess said, "Well, why don't you cut it?" Meaning, why don't you cut your own hair? And this motherfucker pulled out a switchblade and was like, "Okay, come here," and pointed it at my boyfriend's face. This was really fucking scary. We've never had a knife pulled on us before, especially after having a casual conversation about hair. So my boyfriend was like, "Whoa there," and I was just like a deer in headlights. I didn't know what to do. And he was like, "Haha, just kidding. Some people don't like my humor," and he put it back in his pocket. And I awkwardly started walking away, and I kind of urged my boyfriend to come with me, and I told him, "I want to get out of this store right now. I feel very uncomfortable." And so we left. We really wanted to call and complain about the guy, but we were low-key afraid that if we had called, he would be the one to pick up the phone. So we kind of didn't do anything about it. We probably should. I mean, he pulled a knife on us in public and he worked there. What kind of employee pulls a knife on their customers? That's not funny. Don't ever do shit like that. Okay, yeah, that's my story. Shit was fucked. Dolan asked his older brother, Zaraganba, for dating advice one day. When he asked why, Dolan said that there was a girl at school he was interested in going out with. He went on to describe her as someone who wasn't the girly type and loved to roughhouse with the boys. Zaraganba didn't know anything about girls, so he told Dolan that since she was boyish in nature, that he should cut a loud fart in the middle of class. The next day, Dolan came home, red in the face, as though he had been crying. He told Zaraganba that he farted so loud that one of the windows in the classroom shook and fell out of the panel. Everyone had been relentless with their insults after that, since Dolan was in the 4th grade. To make matters worse, the plan didn't work. The girl never talked to Dolan again.
One night when Slaptam was 5 years old, he got out of bed and went to the bathroom at around midnight. He sat on the toilet to do his business when suddenly he looked up and a glowing human figure appeared in front of him. It turned and ran straight into the wall like there was a portal there. Slaptam ran straight into his mum's room without any pants on and yelled,
"There's a ghost in our house."
Luckily, he was in the right place to shit himself. Weirdest rule Legner's parents ever had was not wearing socks in their house. After years of that rule not existing, his mum and dad just suddenly decided that for some reason, wearing socks in the house should be prohibited. If any of them broke the rule, they would face an equally weird punishment. Their parents would make them strip completely naked before locking them in their bedroom.
The weirdest thing Zaraganba has been competitive about is having the most pornography in his group of friends. In Zaraganba's middle school, the guy who knew the most about sex and female parts was considered the coolest, most mature guy in school. Zaragamba wanted to be that guy, so he researched every possible porn variety out there. One day at lunch, another guy started bragging about his porn collection. Zaragamba butted in, and the two of them ended up having a trivia contest about sex to determine who knew the most. The trivia was about everything sensual, from sex positions all the way to weird fetishes. Zaragamba won by correctly answering a question about the smallest penis size in the world, and was given the title of the school's official sex guru.